Stop everything right now. Look closely at the satellite feed from 35.68 north, 51.38 east. The world is watching the orange glow over the Alborz Mountains and calling it a victory for the West. They are wrong. On this 8th day of March 2026, we have witnessed what the pundits call a strategic masterpiece, but what I call a terminal mistake. 12 high-value targets, the very heart of the Iranian Assembly of Experts, have been effectively removed from the equation. The precision strikes were absolute. The decapitation was surgical. But here is the paradox that should keep you awake tonight. By killing the brain, Washington has not killed the body. They have simply released the beast from its leash. I am going to show you why this is the most dangerous moment in human history since the Cuban Missile Crisis. The mainstream media is obsessed with the tactical success of Operation Epic Fury. They count the destroyed bunkers. They analyze the crater diameters. They talk about a regime in its final hours. But they are blind to the strategic transformation occurring in the shadows. This is not merely a news report. It is a post-mortem of a global order that just committed suicide. Let me start with the numbers that actually matter. The strikes did not just hit concrete and steel. They obliterated the only institutional mechanisms capable of de-escalation. In the intelligence world, we call this the decapitation paradox. When you remove the decision makers, you remove the only people authorized to say the word stop. Right now, there is no one left in Tehran with the constitutional authority to sign a peace treaty, yet there are 1,500 regional commanders with the independent authority to launch. Before we go any further, I want you to do one thing. If you realize that the television anchors are lying to you about the safety of our world, type the word collapse in the comments right now. It is time we see who is actually paying attention to the board. Now look at the immediate aftermath. As the smoke clears from the northern districts of Tehran, the global markets are reacting to a reality the politicians refuse to acknowledge. Oil has bypassed $148 per barrel in a vertical line. This is not because of a shortage. It is because of the realization that the mission was never about stability. It was about destruction, and destruction has no exit strategy. They knew exactly what the mission was. Mark Levin and the hawks in Washington told you it would be a righteous victory. They promised a new dawn. Instead, they have delivered a pitch-black night where the rules of engagement have been shredded. The illusion of victory is a powerful drug. It blinds the aggressor to the fact that their enemy has just been radicalized beyond the point of return. By removing the traditional hierarchy, we have birthed a decentralized, headless insurgency that spans from the Mediterranean to the Hindu Kush. This is the catastrophic backfire. The mission was to decapitate the regime to prevent a war. The result is a war that no longer has a head to cut off. Now let me show you how this institutional collapse is about to trigger a global shockwave that starts in the bunkers of the Revolutionary Guard and ends at your local gas station. Now let us peel back the skin of the Iranian state machine. To understand why this decapitation is a failure, you must understand how power actually functions in the shadows of Tehran. Most analysts on television think a nation-state is like a corporation. You fire the chief executive officer and the company freezes. But Iran is not a corporation. It is a biological organism with a redundant nervous system. By eliminating the 12 men of the Assembly of Experts, Washington did not hit the off switch. They shattered it. Look at the classified reality of Protocol 44. It is a directive that was whispered in the corridors of the Revolutionary Guard for decades but never activated. Until now. It states that in the event of a total communication blackout or the elimination of the Supreme Command, every regional commander, every captain of a missile battery, every operator of a suicide drone swarm is granted autonomous engagement authority. They no longer need a code from Tehran. They no longer need a green light from a cleric. They are now the masters of their own tiny, lethal empires. The mission, as Levin calls it, was designed to force a regime collapse. But a regime is a system of rules. When you destroy the rule makers, you do not get a democracy. You get a power vacuum filled by the most radical, the most violent, and the least predictable elements of the military. We are currently tracking 1,500 independent nodes of the Revolutionary Guard across the region. These men are not diplomats. They do not have bank accounts in Switzerland that can be frozen. They do not have families in London they want to protect. They have only their weapons and a doctrine of total resistance. Imagine the nightmare in the Pentagon right now. They are looking at their screens and they see nothing. No central signals, no diplomatic back channels, No one is picking up the red phone because the room with the red phone is a smoking crater. They have achieved the perfect military objective and created the perfect strategic catastrophe. They have created an enemy that cannot be reasoned with because there is no one left to reason. And while the hawks in Washington celebrate their tactical precision, the geopolitical pivot is already shifting. Because when a regional power goes dark, the neighboring predators begin to circle. But they are not circling to help. They are circling to feast on the remains of the global economy that we have just set on fire. Let us shift our focus from the smoldering ruins of the capital to the ancient, blood-soaked soil of the borderlands, where the ghost of history is about to repeat itself. To understand the magnitude of this failure, you must stop looking at the satellite maps and start looking at the soul of the machine. The analysts in the Pentagon are playing a game of chess, but the board they are standing on is built of a logic they do not comprehend. They believe that by removing the head of the state, they induce a paralysis of the will. This is a fundamental strategic illiteracy. Let me show you why the Iran mission is not a solution, but a catalyst for the Karbala paradigm. In 1980, when the world backed a full-scale invasion of this territory, the conventional wisdom in Washington and Baghdad was that the revolutionary government would collapse within weeks. It lasted 8 years. It was a war that saw over 1 million people removed from the equation. Why? Because the doctrine of the sacred defense is not based on the Western concept of victory or survival. It is based on the theological glory of the end. By eliminating the supreme leadership in a high-profile strike, Washington has not triggered a surrender. They have triggered a ritual of collective martyrdom that is hard-coded into the national identity. Look at the numbers from the 1980s. The Iranian state did not have a superior air force or a modern navy. What they had was the ability to mobilize asymmetric biological pressure, human waves that overwhelmed the most advanced Western-supplied tanks. Now fast forward to 2026. That same cultural momentum is now armed with hypersonic missiles, 1,000-mile suicide drones, and decentralized cyber warfare capabilities. The mission has not ended the threat, it has sanctified it. I'm going to show you how this historical inertia works. In the Shia tradition, the most powerful leader is not the one who lives. It is the one who is eliminated by a superior, unjust force. By turning the assembly of experts into martyrs, the West has provided the ultimate recruitment tool for the next generation of the Revolutionary Guard. We are no longer dealing with a government that cares about its gross domestic product or its standing in the United Nations. We are dealing with a decentralized ghost army that believes the apocalypse is a strategic objective. The backfire is already visible on the horizon. The mission was meant to intimidate the proxies in Lebanon, Yemen, and Iraq. Instead, those proxies now believe they have a divine mandate to operate without restraint. The red lines have been erased, and the historical ghost of the 1980s has been resurrected with 21st century technology. Now let us expand the lens. While Washington celebrates a tactical decapitation, the true masters of the global chessboard, Moscow and Beijing, are watching the American military exhaust its strategic reserves in a conflict that has no exit. Let us shift our focus to the shadow players who are about to turn this regional fire into a global cage. While the American eagle is busy tearing at the throat of the Persian lion, the dragon and the bear are not just watching. They are repositioning the entire globe. You must understand that in the cold rooms of the Kremlin and the Zhongnanhai, this decapitation strike is viewed not as an act of strength, but as a gift of strategic exhaustion. Washington has just committed the ultimate sin of the superpower. They have allowed themselves to be tethered to a burning house. Let us shift to the east, specifically to the headquarters of the People's Bank of China. While the fires were still burning in Tehran, Beijing executed a move that will be felt in your bank account for a decade. They have officially activated the alternative settlement system, bypassing the SWIFT network for over $100 billion in energy contracts. The Iran mission was supposed to project American dominance. Instead, it has forced the world's second-largest economy to finally cut the umbilical cord of the US dollar. China is not mourning the loss of the Iranian leadership. They are celebrating the fact that the American military is now locked into a three-front security nightmare. Look at the coordinates. 39.90 north, 116.40 east. At this moment, satellite intelligence suggests that Russian military advisors are being granted unprecedented access to Chinese signals intelligence. The bear and the dragon have realized that the American strategic reserve is at its lowest point in 50 years. By forcing the United States to deploy 3 carrier strike groups to the Persian Gulf to hunt for ghost mines and phantom drones, Washington has left the first island chain in the Pacific wide open. I want you to look closely at the numbers. It costs the United States Navy approximately $6.5 million every time they fire an interceptor missile to stop a $2,000 drone. This is not war. It is an economic liquidation. Moscow knows this. They are currently providing the eyes for the decentralized IRGC commanders, feeding them real-time data on American troop movements from their own orbital assets. The mission was supposed to be a surgical removal. It has turned into a global hemorrhaging of American resources. They knew damn well what the mission was, but they failed to calculate the move of the grandmasters. While we are fixated on the smoking ruins of Tehran, the geopolitical pivot has already moved to the South China Sea and the borders of Eastern Europe. The American giant is now standing in a pit of fire, swinging its sword at shadows, while its rivals are quietly rewriting the rules of the 21st century. Now let us bring this back to the most vulnerable point of all, your wallet. Because the ultimate backfire of this mission isn't just found on a battlefield. It is found in the sudden, catastrophic collapse of the global supply chain that keeps your world running. Let us shift our lens to the $150 oil trap and the fracture of the American heartland. Now let us bring this down from the stratosphere and into the streets of your own city. Because the ultimate backfire of the Iran mission is not found on a map of the Middle East, but in the digital balance of your bank account. As of this hour, the global economy is staring into the abyss of a liquidity blackout. $148.50 per barrel. That is the price of a strategic miscalculation. I want you to look at the fracture happening right now within the halls of Washington. While the hawks are congratulating themselves on their surgical precision, the reality of the Hormuz blockade is beginning to bite. 329 supertankers are currently dead in the water. These are not just ships, they are the iron lungs of the global manufacturing system. By decapitating the regime, we have forced the Revolutionary Guard to execute the economic scorched earth protocol. They no longer care if they can sell their own oil. They only care that you cannot buy yours. The irony is staggering. The mission was sold to the American public as a way to ensure long-term national security. Instead, it has triggered an institutional collapse of the domestic energy market. For the first time in 50 years, we are seeing the decoupling of the dollar from the energy reality of the planet. When the price of crude moves vertically, the cost of every plastic part, every gallon of milk, and every silicon chip moves with it. This is the tax you are paying for a mission that had no second act. But look closer at the internal rot. This mission has not unified the United States. It has shattered the very foundation of the conservative coalition. On one side, you have the establishment voices like Mark Levin demanding total war. On the other, a growing insurgent movement that realizes we are burning our own house to stay warm for a single night. The domestic fracture is no longer a political debate, it is a security risk. When a superpower's capital is divided while its fleet is trapped in a minefield, the empire has entered its terminal phase. They knew damn well what the mission was, but they didn't care about the consequences for the American middle class. They treated the global economy like a secondary concern, forgetting that a military is only as strong as the treasury that funds it. Right now, the treasury is hemorrhaging, and the global markets are pricing in the end of the American century. Now we must look at the final horizon. The board has been set, the pieces have been moved, and the fires are spreading. What comes next is not a return to the status quo. It is the emergence of a new, colder, and more violent world order. Let us move to the final act, the 3 scenarios of a dying order and the signature forecast for the decade ahead. We have reached the final horizon. The smoke over Tehran is no longer just a sign of a tactical strike. It is the funeral pyre of the 20th century world order. Now we must look at the 3 cold, inevitable realities that await us on this broken board. The mission is done, but the consequences are just beginning to breathe. Scenario 1. The ghost insurgency. Within the next 6 months, the state of Iran will officially cease to exist as a centralized entity and metastasize into 1,000 independent cells. Intelligence backchannels are already seeing the first signs of the metastasis protocol. With no central government to hold accountable, Washington will find itself in a permanent shadow war that spans 3 continents. There will be no peace treaties because there will be no one left with the legal authority to sign them. We have traded a predictable enemy for a permanent, invisible, and decentralized nightmare. Scenario 2, the nuclear dash. Look closely at the deep mountain facilities at Fordow and Natanz. By removing the institutional brakes of the assembly of experts, the West has removed the only faction that feared a total nuclear confrontation. We are now operating under the assumption that the remaining nuclear scientists have been integrated into the most radical units of the Revolutionary Guard. By 2027, we are not just looking at a nuclear-armed Iran. We are looking at a nuclear-armed militia with nothing left to lose. The mission to prevent the bomb has effectively guaranteed its assembly. Scenario 3, the Great Realignment. As the price of oil stabilizes at a level that crushes Western industry, the Global South will officially pivot away from the Washington consensus. We are witnessing the birth of the post-dollar era. Beijing will not just fill the vacuum in the Middle East, they will purchase the remains. The Iran mission was a tactical masterpiece and a strategic suicide. It was the moment the American superpower chose a short-term headline over a long-term future. Stop waiting for the news anchors to explain this to you. They are paid to keep you calm. I am here to keep you informed. They knew damn well what the mission was, but they were too arrogant to see the trap. The question is no longer whether the system will break. The question is whether you are prepared for what emerges from the ruins. Subscribe to this channel. Turn on your notifications. Because on this board, the only thing more dangerous than the enemy is the silence of the mainstream media. This is the end of the briefing.